So it's really early. It's like, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning right now over here on the West Coast. I couldn't sleep, got up, made some coffee, and was reading some articles talking about the layoffs taking place within the construction industry. And, it's not unheard of to hear about a rise in layoffs, especially when it comes to construction during slow times within the economy. I mean, it's a pretty good indicator considering that building is like the number one industry, considering manufacturing, all the input costs, the energy cost, the labor cost, and all of it being domestic. Construction is a really good sign of what's taking place within the economy. So if you have like a healthy construction market taking place, then generally the economy is doing fairly well. Now, I was reading about how there is a spike in layoffs or a rise in layoffs. I don't know about necessarily a spike that I was reading about, but a rise in layoffs taking place within the construction market. And there was some articles, specifically talking about like Texas and Florida being some of these places where there's a lot of layoffs within this construction market. And so when I went and looked at a chart, I went up and pulled in, there's a link down in the description, layoffs and discharges. This is from construction, not seasonally adjusted. And you can see like really, I'm going to show you this chart because YouTube flips it around. You're going to see it backwards like a mirror image, but that's okay. You're still going to see it here. So here's the chart itself. And you can see like right over here, this is where we're at. It's not like, this is COVID right here. So that, just kind of eliminate that out of there. And you can see it's not like that bad, right? I mean, it's kind of almost like kind of cyclical, really. I mean, you can look at it. It's like every single spike is literally the middle of winter. This is the first time in history that we had a spike in July. Going all the way back, this is like 25 years, this thing goes back, and this is the first time that we have had a spike in construction layoffs in July, in the middle of summer, right? All this chart goes all the way back. You can click on every one of these spikes, and I mean, this one's like November, this one's, that one's March, that one's October, this one's December, that one's February, that one's December. They're all in the middle of winter. And that would make sense. Like, construction generally, the majority of it is happening during the winter, especially when it comes to like residential housing. Most people want to get that structure assembled and dried in so that during the winter you can do all the finish work. So a lot of construction happens during the summertime, but here we have a spike in layoffs taking place in the summertime, which is really the first time in history that we can see this happening. So now I think to myself, man, this is a really bad sign. Like, this is a bad sign for the economy, no doubt about it. But I think about what it is that the position that the home builders themselves are in. Like, you can say, oh man, this is a sign that the home builders are deteriorating and like they're not doing well and they're like, failing essentially. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case because you're seeing home builders stock rising and rising dramatically. It's like on a rocket ship. And so now I think to myself, okay, if this business that lays off a bunch of employees, so you're not putting that output cost, right, and labor costs going out there because you just laid all these people off, and you're sitting on a ton of inventory, right? I mean, this is like more newly constructed homes for sale, like new homes for sale than like since the great financial crisis or something like that. It's like an overwhelming amount of new home inventory sitting there waiting for buyers. This is the home builders, the nationwide home builders who are essentially sitting on this inventory, this unsold inventory of new homes. Okay, so here they are with the product, right? That they just laid a bunch of people off. Right? So they're not paying out the employees anymore. They're not paying paychecks out there. They got a buttload of inventory, and you have a situation in which that the mortgage rates are coming down. Like they're at 11-month lows now, and people are out there buying homes or at least participating in the market. Now, is it significant to the point it's just like, oh, wow, look, a big turnaround? No, not like that at all. but it is showing the signs. We haven't had a Federal Reserve move yet. Like the Fed funds rate is still where, where it's been for months now. But the mortgage rates are coming down based on the credible threat that the Federal Reserve will be cutting interest rates very soon. So you can see how just the expectations of what it is that's coming into the future has actually created the economic environment in which that they are looking for, right? As these lower rates come in for mortgages, people are then taking part within the mortgage market, buying the newly constructed homes, which is then bringing cash to the home builders who have just laid everybody off. Well, not everybody, but a bunch of people. So you see how this is actually positioned the home builders in a way to get that money without having the output cost. And this is kind of a sign of it, considering the major layoffs taking place in July. Like, this is the first time in history you've seen this. Yeah, July 2025. And it's, a pretty significant spike. It's up to 238 on this chart, based in thousands, right? That's a lot. That's a lot of people to be laid off in the construction field in the middle of the building season. So when I think about what it is that means for the economy, it doesn't show good signs for the economy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad sign for the builders considering the position that they are in. A lot of people say that, this is all going to come crashing down. You're going to see the housing market crash. You're going to see all that. And I think to myself, man, I don't know. When you have a credible threat of lowering interest rates that creates a 11-month low for mortgages, I don't know if we're necessarily going to have a major crash within the housing market if you can create a better economic environment just based off of the perceptions. Right? I mean, think about it. Like, they haven't done anything yet, but they created a better economic environment. You can see it taking place right now with the spike in mortgages that are now, at an 11-month high. This is really how I think intuitively most people end up, like, they think too intuitively, like, hey, this spike shows failure and the failure means that everything is going to fail. And that's not necessarily the case. Some things fail, yeah. Like, the spike in layoffs in the middle of summer, that's kind of a failure. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everything that is connected to it is a failure, right? Some people have positioned themselves quite well to deal with it. And considering that they have been sitting on this inventory for quite some time, trying to figure out how it is that they can move this inventory, they are now sitting with tons of it, right? Trying to figure out how they move it. All you have to do is just put out the expectation that there's going to be lower mortgage rates and the stuff starts to move. What happens when you actually lower rates? Well, especially if you deliver it with the message that everything is cool and hunky-dory and everything's working and this is support and we have alleviate tariffs and we know all this problem, and you start, creating an economic environment in which that people don't feel threatened anymore, what's going to end up happening, right? You can actually create an economic environment that is far better than anybody would have expected, considering you don't have to really do anything except for just alleviate the threat. All right. I don't want to know if, man, I can't speak. I don't want to be out here too long with you guys. We're 8 minutes into it. Just wanted to give you guys a shout to show you, like, what it is that I'm finding here with this spike in layoffs. So, in the middle of summertime, considering that's the first time in history, I think that's a pretty significant indicator. Warren Buffett taking financial advice from UE. Heard he put some of his cash in Lennar. Yeah, absolutely he did. And those news articles came out far after I had done the videos talking about how I was positioning myself within the home builders. And I didn't really want to give that as financial advice. Like, I didn't want to give that investment advice. I don't want to give advice like that. Like, that's not what I'm doing here. But I did want to share with you what it is that I was doing and the feelings that I was getting from the position that I am at with the retail lumberyard, working retail sales, but living in the Pacific Northwest, knowing, a lot of loggers, truck drivers, mill operators, the network distribution hubs, all the other, outlets, stuff like that. It just gave me this feeling. I'm like, man, I don't feel it getting worse. Like, it's bad, right? It's really bad out there. In fact, it's probably about as bad as I've ever seen it. But it's like, as far as the deterioration, I don't feel it deteriorating anymore. Right? And so if it's not deteriorating more, are we at the bottom? That's kind of what I was feeling. A few more phone calls, a few more sales, a little bit more activity happening within the vendors, and I'm thinking, I don't know if we're necessarily going to deteriorate any further than this. It seems to me it's about as bad as it is. And then if you have a credible threat of lowering of interest rates that actually creates an economic environment that is better, where you find mortgages are starting to move, housing starts to move, all these inventory starts to move, like that's a good sign. And yet the Fed hasn't done anything. And I'm thinking, wow, yeah, we must be at a bottom, right? If you can change perception with a credible threat, right, and create a better economic environment, what happens when you actually lower rates? What happens when you do have a better economic environment with alleviation of tariffs and all that other stuff, right? You actually find like economic stimulus from that. It doesn't mean you have to go out there and actually stimulate the economy. All you have to do is just alleviate the threat. So when I saw it that way, I'm like, well, I'm going to position myself for this. And people are like, dude, you're nuts taking that position, the one that I had taken. And I'll just tell you, it was a 3 times leveraged ETF, which everybody says, dude, this is not the way you position yourself. You do not buy and hold these things. This is meant for like hedging against, other things. Most people only hold it for about 24 hours. And I totally get it. Right? I mean, holding on to a leveraged ETF is like, asking for it in a loss because you'll lose 3 times, because it's leveraged up by 3 times. So it's just like the gains are 3 times and so are the losses. But I'm thinking, well, how many losses can you have if you're at the bottom, right? Like, and I don't know if we're at the bottom. I'm just getting a feeling that we're at the bottom, right? Like, how would I know? I'm just the uneducated economist. But I study a lot of monetary policy and I'm working retail sales and I know a lot about distribution hubs and mill operations and, the whole industry within itself. And I'm thinking, it's bad. It's not getting worse. Blood in the streets, right? You buy when there's blood in the streets. You buy when people are fearful, right? Be greedy when people are fearful and fearful when people are greedy. It's not like, just when everybody's on one side of the boat, you get on the other side of the boat, right? It's just like, I mean, I don't know all these cliche terms that are out there, but it's the reality of the situation. When I see people who are like, dude, you're nuts, you're crazy, that's not the way it's going to work, and I'm thinking, well, you don't see what I see, right? You're seeing, whatever it is that you're reading on the news out there, and that's why you're telling me that. But if you could see what I see, if you could get the phone calls I was getting, if you could, talk to the people that I'm talking to, you may not have that same feeling anymore. Please take profits. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things, like, I think most people end up, when they listen to, that's one reason why I don't want to give this investment advice. Like, I'll call it investment advice, because then you have to listen to me for when to sell out and, sell out of that position. And that's not the way you got to do this, right? You got to do it on your own and know exactly what it is that you are taking positions in for your own reasons and understandings of it. And by doing that, then you can actually position yourself to do well, because you'll know when to take the profits and get out. So as many people are, again, telling me I'm crazy and everything else, I will get the feelings to, to get out when I feel it's most appropriate. And, considering, some of the things that I'm seeing coming, within the industry itself, I know at one point I'm going to move out of builders and I'm going to move into lumber suppliers, lumber mills, right? And if the ETF, if the nail ETF is, done well inside of that, yeah, I'll cash out of that, move into, into that, particular position, just because I know that that demand's going to go up. If those home builders start ripping through that inventory and you start finding that there's a lot of transactions happening within the real estate market, within the new home market, right? There's new home sales. If that starts to happen, that those builders are going to jump out there and start taking out permits and doing new starts. When that happens, there's going to be a spike in lumber. When lumber spikes, those mills are going to do quite well, right? So why be in the home builders at that point if they've already sold off their inventory, made their money? Now get out of them and move into the lumber mills. That's the kind of what I'm seeing. Right? And now how far out? I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I don't know how far out. But buyer traffic is going to come positive at some point. It's going to turn builder sentiment positive. When buyer traffic turns positive, it's on. You're going to see lumber spike after that. I know it is, because the builders are going to want to take advantage of that situation and start building homes. When they start building homes, I just don't feel that there's a lot of inventory out there considering how much mill curtailments have taken place. Like, to me, it's lining up just easily. People are going to call it manipulation. And I'm thinking, well, I've been calling it out for years now. And so unless they're listening to the uneducated economists, this is just the natural progression of how it goes down. you know? I mean, it's not like I have some insider information from somebody out there who's giving me this info. This is just what I'm seeing from boots on the ground position. It's not that difficult, but it is complicated. There's a lot to it, but it's like once you see it, it's not that hard. All right. Got to get a good, reliable source for agriculture in sanitary environments. Not everyone sees it from a realistic perspective. The quality is also falling. Lennar is starting to build stick homes instead of the block to help increase profit margins. Never but a stick build in Florida. It would take several rounds of lower mortgage rates in order to see the numbers needed to really peel off the inventory. Many responsible folks will hold out and wait. Cash buyers want more deterioration. Yeah, I mean, I would agree that, in order to see anything like really significant, then yes, I would agree with a lot of what you're saying inside of that. My only pushback against that is like, we haven't had anything happen. And inside of the financial powers that be and their adjustment of their interest rates, nothing has happened. But yet the credible threat of it has really had a profound impact. So think about that. How much can they project out there into the people's brains, their thinking process, a better economic environment into the future, and therefore they start to take advantage of it? Like, already it's happening, and I mean, it's barely even taken place. They just give them like a little nibble. Here you go, bink. Here's a little credible threat of lowering of interest rates. How do you guys like that? It's like, oh, we like it. Ooh, we like it. Good. Give us more. Right? They love it. You can just see it. It's like, to me, it's just like, it's so obvious. It's hard not to see it this way. And it's difficult to explain it, especially when people think that the Fed is reactionary. Right? If people think that the Fed is reactionary, like they are, data dependent on all this stuff, then they will never, ever, ever see the credible threat and how the credible threat is the monetary policy. Adjustment of interest rates is data dependent, but that's not the monetary policy. It's the message that is delivered with it. That is the monetary policy. And nobody really sees it because they don't know to see it. They think that the Fed is data dependent because the Fed says they're data dependent. For the adjustment of interest rates, they are. But it's not the adjustment of interest rates that is the main monetary policy tool. It's the credible threat of adjusting interest rates, and it's obvious when you just see it now taking place within the economy today. Like, this is evidence of it happening right now. And it's again, it's very difficult for a lot of people to see because the majority of the narrative speaks about the Federal Reserve in the old fashion. Because the Fed used to shock the markets with interest rates. Like, one day you would just wake up and there would be interest rate adjustments and people would be like, whoa, what the hell happened? Right? But now they give this forward guidance way ahead of time. Signal. Right? Forward guidance is a little different. It's when they actually say, we are cutting at the next rate, not possibly cutting at the next rate. Signaling and forward guidance isn't exactly the same thing. Right? Forward guidance is a monetary policy tool where they deliberately tell the people, we are going to do this at the next meeting, right? We are going to cut at the next meeting. We are going to raise at the next meeting, Right? They may not tell you exactly by how much, but they will tell you what exactly they are going to do. We are going to maintain low interest rates for the significant amount of time going into the future with no adjustments to it at all. Forward guidance, constantly telling the people what it is that they're going to do. Signaling is different. Signaling is when they put this idea, well, according to layoffs, the labor market got to stay strong. Waller's out there screaming, hey, let's cut, other Fed, like this is signaling when you have such a narrative that's projected out there that the people have really just locked it in. Like, the Fed hasn't said it, but it's locked into their thoughts. Like right now, it's like, I don't even know what the odds are of them not cutting, but I mean, it's pretty low, right? They're going to cut. And so as people incorporate this belief into their system or into their strategy system, right? As they incorporate that into their ideas of what it is that they're going to do, this is the monetary policy, right? This incorporation of the idea of what it is that the Fed is going to do because they have communicated it so well out there. So once you see that, once you look for that, and once you see that, then you start seeing the monetary policy. You start seeing and understanding why it is that you're finding things like mortgages coming down, mortgage rates coming down, and new mortgage applications spiking, right? And this is the reason why. The more we understand like things like the neutral interest rate and how elevated inflation expectation, the fear of tariffs, the fear of, problems in the future starts pulling that neutral interest rate higher, it actually makes the economy less restricted. Now, most people don't see it because what we have to understand is that when the neutral interest rate makes the economy less restricted, it really only benefits a certain group of people, the top 20%. Right? The bottom 80%, there was a time it would help. Right? It would help in a way that if they lowered interest rates, then, we could go out there and borrow money and, be happy with our borrowed money to buy houses and cars and go on vacation and do all the stuff with. But unfortunately, now we're in debt saturation, right? So once you're in debt saturation, it doesn't matter how better the financial conditions are, you don't have any ability to take out any more money to benefit your life any. It's not like it's going to help. Right? So lowering interest rates is really only benefiting the top 20% of people anyway, as they get to take advantage of that new money that comes in. They're the ones who are borrowing it to, buy the houses and cars and go on vacation and do all the other stuff with it. And the asset prices go up when those lower interest rates come in. And when the asset prices go up, they get even more rich. So like the bottom 80% is like literally out of the game. They're like not even important anymore, right? The only thing that they're important for is showing up for work and flipping burgers, serving beers, and twisting the wrenches and stuff like that. And I mean, I don't like saying that. It's like it doesn't feel comfortable to say it. I don't feel good about it in any way, shape, or form. I have a retail job. I mean, I'm part of that 80% of people out there, but it's just coming to that understanding that there is literally nothing that they can do that is going to do anything to benefit our lives that is going to actually incorporate into the economy in a good way. So they don't look at us because we don't increase aggregate demand. We don't increase our consumption when we get lower interest rates available to us because we're debt saturated and even a good job sucks. It doesn't buy anything. So like it's just we're out of the game. So once you see it that way, it's just like, okay, so the bottom 80%, you're in survival, right? That's the survival mode. Figure out how much you can get at the end of the month in order to, pay for an apartment and pay for the insurance and pay for the stuff that you need in your life. But the idea that you're going to have anything benefit from it is pretty much out the window. Like that's not going to happen, right? Those people who are in that 9 to 5 job, stuck in that, looking for a way to get out of it, literally will never, ever, ever, ever be able to do it so long as they're expecting a politician to fix the system. Those people need to figure out how it is that they could get that extra money, the money beyond the money you're already making. And so once you figure out how to make extra money, whether it's online sales or doing YouTube content or figuring out a side hustle business or doing something else out there, now you have an ability to then buy into something that is going to have a return. Because if you don't do that, your day job isn't going to be enough. That's the only thing. It's not going to be enough. And so if you don't do it, then, I know it sucks for a lot of people. They're like, dude, I already work 1,000,000 hours. I get it. You're going to have to work 1,000,000 more, right? Because this isn't a matter of being fair. It's not a fair thing, right? They can't make it fair. It's not going to be fair. And so once you understand that it's not fair and it's survival of the fittest out there, and if you can beat your competition, which is essentially everybody waiting for somebody to do something and make their life better, if you go out there and just try harder than them, then you will be able to access the apartment. You'll be able to access the car, the vacations, the investments, everything that you want to do. But it's going to take far more than just that day job. And it's going to take a lot of discipline, and it's going to take a lot of sacrifice. And people say, man, that sounds like it's terrible. Yeah, it is. It's like this world sucks, man. And if you can't figure out how it is that you can position yourself and make it better for you, then you're going to suffer the consequences from that. It's just the way it is now. I look at the housing market and it's not really available to the average person. It's not meant, it's not like it's not meant for them. It's just that it's not in a condition in which that it's meant for them. Like if you can't build your own home, if you can't use your day job, like an average day job to acquire a loan that can make the payments on it, it's like it's not even meant for you anymore. This economy is not meant for you. Doesn't that suck? This is terrible. I know it's a horrible way for a lot of people to like internalize that, but once you do and you accept it, you're like, okay, well, what is it that I do need to do? All right. Because once you figure that part, like once you realize that you have to do something that's different from what it is that you are doing, then it becomes a whole lot easier to deal with the situation. Then you can actually acquire a house, you can get the investments, you can do all the things that you need to do. But the idea that the average job should be enough, like a living wage kind of thing, like, yeah, no, whatever. I mean, okay, whatever you say. I don't know what it should be, could be, what's fair. I don't know what any of that stuff is anymore, because everything that I have ever learned from my life that I have done, my day job has never been enough. Never. If I haven't done side hustles, I've never had enough. Right? And even doing the side hustles, it doesn't seem like it's enough. And that's all there is to it. Right? Now, knowing that the top 20% is essentially what the financial system, what the banking system, what the politicians, that's the only thing that they're focused in on. And the reason why they're focused in on it is because those are the people who are doing the consuming. The top 10% of the people back in like, I don't know, was it back in like the 90s was doing like 30% of the consumption. Now they're doing close to 50. The top 10% of household incomes just a few decades ago was doing 30% of the consumption, and now they're doing close to 50. Do you think that's going to reverse? Like, do you think it's going to go back to the top 10% doing 30% of the consumption? Or do you think eventually the top 10% are going to be doing better than 50% of the consumption? Because that's the direction it's headed. That's the inequality. That's the separation between the rich and the poor. And that's what happens when you have ever increasing amounts of new money that pours into the system, is that you find that asset prices and stock prices and all, or stock values and all this other stuff starts to go up, but it's only available to a handful of people who are taking advantage of it, as most people live paycheck to paycheck and they just find themselves struggling ever further away from it. If you have ever increasing amounts of new money, you will have ever increasing amounts of inequality. Guaranteed. No doubt about it. And there's really nothing that anybody can do to stop it. I don't care what laws, what, taxes and all the other stuff. I mean, they say, oh, you could do this, that, and the other thing. And I look and I'm like, can you give me any evidence in history of that working? Like what about these 10-year period where they really inflicted some pain upon some people in order to create the economic environment in which that we're describing, and then boom, it didn't work, right? It didn't work. Because if it worked, we would find now being better times than before. The inequality is growing worse. The wedge is getting driven even deeper. It's not like it's reversing. There is no reversal to this. The only reversal is an inevitable crash, but how far out is that? Who knows? What games they can play with digital currencies and negative interest rates, and who knows what they can do. I don't know how long they can play this game. All right. How long did I go off? Half an hour? Do you want to call it quits, guys? You want to keep going? We got 236 people watching. If you want to keep going for a little bit longer, go hit that like button. Let's get it up to 100 people liking this video in the next 5 minutes, and I'll stick around for a little longer. Utah is literally the most dangerous place on earth. Huh. Okay. Morning, brother. Morning. Thank you guys for being here. All right, we need to move to Mississippi where cost is like 40% below average. Yeah, but then there's like, okay, so a buddy of mine, he found a house over in Missouri for like $32,000. He watches my videos all the time. In fact, you might even see him up in here. He got a house over in Missouri for like $32,000, and he says it wasn't much of a house, but it was a house that you could live in. And I thought, man, $32,000 for a house? That's incredible. Like, why didn't anybody just jump on there? Like, this is like what everybody's looking for. And they told me there's no money in Missouri, man. Like, you got to be like, if you don't have a business established that's doing well or something like that, like going and earning money in a place that doesn't have a whole lot of cash flowing around isn't exactly easy, And so he was like, essentially, he couldn't chase money in Missouri, and so there was no real money to be made there, and he had to move to areas in which that money transacts, right? And so that's the problem with Missouri, is that you can buy a house super cheap, but then you can't really find anything to do there that earns money, like any kind of significant. Some people probably could. You could do online things or whatever. So if you have the ability to remote work, it might make sense. But again, like, you know, being in an area like where I'm at, Astoria, there's like tourists and industry and all kinds of stuff that's happening here. Their money flows all over the place. There's all kinds of construction happening inside of like the museum, the hospital, the apartment complexes that are going up. I mean, there's money flying all over the place. So it's easy to participate in the economy. Right? But if you go to a place where it's just like everybody's just sitting around going, nope, I only got $5, man, and then there ain't no money to be made, All right. Dying thinking it's most dangerous though. Okay. Tony Berg. Wow, I know that they are building east of Houston like mad. I'm in Orange, Texas area, by the way, and until recently, the area I'm referring to was rice and soybean fields. Utah is a drug den. All right. Missouri is a decent state. Mississippi is bottom three. Friends was in Missouri a month ago. Friends who are GSP trainers, breeders, are doing well, but the rest of the area is depressed, as most ag. Utah is hidden gem in my eyes. Utah, huh? Yep, I like watching the people's videos in Utah is a hellhole. Huh. Wow. You guys are really bashing on Utah. All right. Yeah, what if you remote work? Well, that would be the only thing, right? Banks lending out so much money in the Northeast has driven prices to such unrealistic heights. Layoffs are here. Finally got into a live rate cuts this week, then higher long-term yields, then higher mortgage rates, then more chaos. What we thinking? I don't know. I think it's going to depend on the message that they deliver with it. Right? I mean, that's literally what it comes down to. This is the reason why I don't look at the interest rate adjustments as the main monetary policy tool, because there's going to be a message that is delivered with it. And with that message is either going to raise or lower those mortgage rates. And we don't look to the Fed to lower mortgage rates. We look to the Fed's delivery of a message with their interest rate adjustment, whether it's up, down, or sideways. That message will then impact the financial markets. Like, that's how this works. I mean, you can see evidence of it. Last time they cut rates, mortgage rates went up. Right? So people are looking to the Fed to cut mortgage rates, and it's like the Fed doesn't cut mortgage rates. Right? The Fed cuts overnight lending rates between the big banks, and eventually it will lead into mortgage rates coming down, especially if they are messing with the mortgages in the mortgage-backed security market, like through quantitative easings or something like that. But that's not what they're up to. So this market is really based on perception. What it is that people think is happening into the future. And if you have more people who are believing and thinking and feeling like there is going to be less mortgage or less interest rates going into the future, or lower interest rates, they will start behaving in a way that creates that outcome. All right, guys, you got about 20 seconds to go get about 15 more likes on that like button, or we're just going to end the live stream and we'll see you again this afternoon. All right. Prisons are the most stable places to work, or Walmart. Colleges are closing. Yeah, I would think like military would be the most stable place to work. All right. When in Missouri, thought that these areas would be great if remote tech and high-speed internet were available, housing and cost of living. Building 7 was professional demolition. Section 8 housing driving the higher rent. So, I mean, I think Section 8 and driving the higher rent, I think that's just, I mean, essentially that is a symptom of the abundance of new money that is flowing through the system. Now, I mean, it doesn't really take that much to see that government intervention does have a profound impact, especially when you have subsidies and, all the intervention to try and maintain a particular economic environment. But that's really a pushback against the underlying economic forces that are out there. So, hold on here. Give me 1 second here, guys. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can find this in Cantillon's essay. So there is a section in which that Cantillon talks about the rents and leases that people pay that will then be a sign of the abundance of money, right? And so as we kind of blame certain things for the reasonings for the high rents, you can have all these, idea of Section 8 or the government interventions and all this other stuff. But ultimately, it's the abundance of new money that's in the system that's creating this. And I cannot find it. Where is that? That sucks. Oh, here we go. Okay. It says, I know no better measure than the leases and rents of property owners to judge the abundance and scarcity of money in circulation. When land is leased at a high rate, it's a sign that there is plenty of money in the state. But when the land has to be leased at a much lower rate, it shows, other things being equal, that money is scarce. Right? So this is really the signs of the times. Right? When you have an abundance of money in the system, even though most of the people don't have it, right? But the abundance of money in the system is going to be shown inside of the rents. He knows no better measure of it than the leases and rents. So once you look at it that fashion, it was just like, yeah, we can blame government, but that's more of a sign. It's more of a symptom. It's more of like evidence that there's an abundance of money in the system. It's not the problem. The problem is the abundance of money and the way that people behave with that money. The signs of it is the government doing their things. Like that's the symptom. Government doesn't do it. That's what's really like hard for a lot of people to internalize, is that it's not the government doing it. It's underlying economic forces that the governments are reacting to. Right? See, even the fact that we are using a fiat-based currency and have the wedge driven as deep as it is because of underlying economic forces that are creating it. Like the government says, well, I know what we can do. We can create fiat currency and drive 80% of the people into pain and misery. That sounds fun, right? Or no, wait a minute, we can just do it for 20% of the people, and us 20% of the people, we're really going to stick it to them. Like, I don't know that plan to be like real. Like a lot of people will look at all this New World Order concept stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I dove deep into that. But when I started diving into the underlying economic forces that are at play that separate the rich from the poor, and when you bring new money in and how it is that those people react with that new money and deal with that new money, this is the outcome. Now, we should have failed a long time ago as the United States. We were a manufacturing powerhouse. We brought in all the gold. We sold all the stuff. We brought in all the gold. We raised our standard of living. Right? When we did that, we started buying foreign production. When the foreign production came in, domestic manufacturers left. That was the time for equilibrium. Right? That was the moment in which that the power of the United States was to be relinquished out there to somebody else to be the manufacturing powerhouse, and then they get all the gold. Because that's how the economy works, right? Has flow of money to one manufacturer, to the most industrious people, to the people who have figured out how to do transport. Then it goes on to somebody else after they have risen their standard of living, moved into luxuries, bought foreign production, and lost all their gold to the foreign producers, right? And this is how the equilibrium of the economy works. It's just it's a balancing act that ends up happening, right? But if you intervene and you say, well, wait a minute, it's time to relinquish the gold. And I'm like, yeah, that's how it works. Like, you manufactured, you produced great stuff, you increased your standard of living. Now it's time to relinquish the gold. And then you lose your standard of living. You got to fall into poverty because that's the ordinary course of things. Sorry. And then everybody, in the governments that be, was like, well, we're just going to keep the gold. How does that sound? And the world was like, that sounds terrible. And they're like, well, we're not going to give you any other choice. We're just going to do it. And I was just like, we don't have any other choice. And I was just like, well, you do. You do have a choice. You cannot accept the dollar. And they're like, well, if we don't accept the dollar, then we can't do transactions and we're going to starve and die. Yeah, that'll happen. We all fall into poverty. That's what ends up happening. So you're just going to have to accept fiat currency or starve. Which one do you want? So here we are today. Right? And that's the unfortunateness of it. But it's okay. Whatever, right? I mean, whatever. We just got to figure out what we got to do about it. There's nothing that you can do to stop it. It's just an underlying economic force that they tried to prevent from creating poverty and misery for the American people, and now set the entire globe up for poverty and misery. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to fix that. There ain't no fixing it. I just understand that it's taken place, and so I'm going to position myself in accordance to what it is that I'm seeing and feeling out there. 250 people watching. Thank you so much for hitting that thumbs up button. We got it up to 110 people. I really appreciate that. We're probably going to go for another maybe 15 minutes here or so, and then I got to go get ready for work because, we all got day jobs to go to, right? Well, not all of us. Some of us got day jobs to go to. All right. We sold the world debt by use of the dollar. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I love how people are like, oh, this is government's fault. And it's like, no, it's not. It's our own fault for accepting it. We volunteered to use the dollar. We do not have to accept this. We choose to. And that's unfortunate, right? It's unfortunate for most people because they have no idea that there is some other option out there. They have no idea that there is some other way. They have no idea what even happened to the dollar. A lot of people think that the dollar is still backed by gold in Fort Knox. Like, they have no idea what's happening. None. And so with that loss of true understanding of what is happening, there is literally nothing that can be done to fix this. The only thing you can do is understand the situation that we are in so you can position yourself for it. Yeah. All right. Reminds me of our old morning coffee talks. Yeah, there he is. What's happening, Ryan? Yeah. Dollar is the best scam going. How does it all get out of the pawn shop? I wish I was a moderator so I could boot Jose. What's Jose saying? Where's he at? Free Charlie. Just stop reading his comments. All right. I don't know what he's saying. BRICS, USD no longer the global reserve currency. That is probably one of the biggest misfortunate communications that have been delivered out there through the mainstream media narrative. That is not right. BRICS are not going to dethrone the dollar, not even close. They can't. Like literally, they cannot do it. There is no way for them to do it. Right? And the reason why they can't do it is because they simply just don't have the ability to issue out. Hold on one second. All right. The reason why they're not is because they do not have the ability to issue out the safe and liquid asset to the level that the United States has done. Like, okay, the BRICS could take over as a world reserve currency, but everybody's going to be suffering in pain and misery and poverty from the failure to do transactions or the lack of ability to do transactions because there's simply no currency out there to do transactions with. And as people say, well, they can print up their own money. No, they can't. The way you print up money is to have a safe and liquid asset for somebody to buy. The United States Treasury, as much as people despise the idea of it, is the safe and liquid asset. And there is no country, not the BRICS nations, no other nation in the entire world is going to go into debt as deep and as with as much confidence from the globe as the United States has done. Like, let me ask you something. Are you going to take your entire retirement and go and put it into China's government bonds? Are you going to go put it in Brazil government bonds? Probably not, right? Like, that's not the safe place to go to. But that's essentially what would have to happen in order for those nations to take over as a world reserve currency. Okay. Understanding that these nations want to be producer savers. And if they want to be producer savers, then that means they have to be producing stuff and selling that stuff out there to the world in order to get the money. We're a debtor consumer nation. Way different than being a producer saver. We used to be a producer saver, but now we're a debtor consumer. And so we consume the production of the world and we issue out a safe and liquid asset for them to put on their balance sheet and do world trade with. Right? There is no competition. There is literally none. Like the second place competition is so far away from what the dollar is doing that they aren't even in sight. Right? Those BRICS nations couldn't even come remotely close to being able to perform the amount of transactions that the United States dollar is doing. They wouldn't even come close. You end the dollar system, everybody will be in poverty and misery and starvation in a matter of a moment. And BRICS nations are not a competition. In fact, they're a benefit to the Fed, right? They're an actual benefit to the Federal Reserve because the Federal Reserve is in a position in which that they are trying to figure out, desperately trying to figure out how it is that they are going to be providing the world with their liabilities, the Federal Reserve liabilities, and not send the United States onto an unsustainable debt path, which they're essentially already on. Like, this is a major problem for the Federal Reserve. And if you got another nation out there saying, hey, you know, we can do some of these transactions too, it'd be like, could you? God, that would just be great because we're about ready to cause the United States to go into into a major debt pain, right? If we continue to try and provide the world with the dollars they need in order to do transactions. So yeah, if you could guys do a few of these, that would be great. That's literally how the Federal Reserve is looking at it. I mean, it's hard to see it in that fashion because everybody thinks that, you know, the dollar is like on this verge of failure or something like that. And people who have taken in that kind of consideration really have misunderstood what it is that's really happening out there when it comes to the dollar-denominated debt. All the BRICS nations, maybe not Russia, but all the BRICS nations, every one of them has issued out dollar-denominated debt. That means they have written out debts that are due in dollars. Brazil, whoever decides to buy this bond, 100 US dollars plus interest due in 10 years. That went out into circulation. That gets used like dollars. It doesn't have anything to do with the United States. It has nothing to do with the United States, not our government, not our banking system, not our people, nothing. It doesn't have anything to do with the United States. This has to do with Brazil and whoever decided to loan Brazil the money by buying that bond that was in dollars, due in dollars, and is being used as dollars to do transactions. Right? That's how much dollars exist in the world, that the BRICS nations actually produce dollars. It's so crazy to think. They write debts that are due in dollars and then use those debts like transactions like they were dollars. That's how many dollars exist in this world. It's unreal. Right? Once you see it in this fashion, it's like, man, there is no way. There ain't no chance in the world that the dollar is going to go anywhere on account of the BRICS nations taking over. Not way. Gold? Nope. Gresham's law kicks in. You have two currencies out there, dollars and gold. I will take all my dollars, bring it right over to you, and hoard all the gold for myself. And everybody would do that. Hold on one second. In here, let me see if I can find it real quick without. The Fed can inject money into the economy in still other ways. This is like the key that a lot of people are missing. Right? Once you get this part, it really starts to make a lot more sense on what they're going to do with like the central bank digital currencies, the stable coins, all that other stuff. I don't believe it's to, I don't know what it is that people have as far as their expectations from these stable coins and stuff. I've already had it in my mind a long time ago, even before the term central bank digital currency was even a concept, that they were going to take cash into a digital currency. They were calling it e-currency at the time. They didn't even have a name for it like digital currency yet. They're going to take cash, move it into e-currency, because once you get cash out of the system, then you can take interest rates into negative territory. That's their goal. That's the goal for digital currencies. Everything else is like, yeah, all the crazy conspiracy stuff that, yeah, all that stuff is probably true, all the tracking, tracing, all that other stuff, but ultimately it's to take interest rates into negative territory. And now if you want to call that devaluation of the dollar or something, okay, yeah, that's true too. It's just like, but the dollar is not really meant to hold value. It's meant to do transactions. It's just a currency, to trade one good and service over for another good and service. So when people are like, oh man, we have to be real concerned about devaluation of the dollar, and I'm like, well, if you plan on holding the dollars, I guess you would, right? Anyway, it goes on to say this: the Fed can inject money into the economy in still other ways. For example, the Fed has the authority to buy foreign government debt as well as domestic government debt. So right now, they buy the domestic government debt. They buy the debt of the United States government. Those bonds go onto the Fed's balance sheet, and the Fed issues out dollars. The Federal Reserve's liabilities are the cash, the dollars, the bank deposits, the reserves. This is the Fed's liability. The asset is the U.S. government bond. So people say, oh, the United States printed up all this money. No, the United States printed up U.S. bonds, which can be used like money. A lot of people do transactions using U.S. bonds as opposed to cash. But the cash came from the Federal Reserve buying that bond and issuing out the liability, the Federal Reserve note, right? So as the bond comes due, the Federal Reserve note comes back to the Fed, and unless the Fed rolls that over into another bond, that money disappears, right? And that's essentially what's been happening through quantitative tightening. Now, when it comes time for the Federal Reserve to fire up the printing presses again, they have to buy something. What is it that they're going to buy? Everybody says the United States government bonds. But the United States is on an unsustainable debt path, meaning that they go into a significant money printing, quantitative easing again, and go and start buying these government bonds. They're going to crash the government. So they can't necessarily buy the government bonds. Ben Bernanke said it 20-something years ago. The speech came out in 2002, right? That the Federal Reserve can inject money into the economy. This is directly from Ben Bernanke 20-something years ago. The Fed can inject money into the economy in still other ways. For example, the Fed has the authority to buy the foreign government debt as well as the domestic government debt. Potentially, this class of asset offers huge scope for the Fed operations. as the quantity of foreign assets, that's that foreign government bonds, right? Buying the debt of some euro nation or whatever, right? The quantity of foreign assets eligible for purchase by the Fed is several times the stock of U.S. government debt. That's the plan. That's the plan. He said it 20 something years ago. Eventually, the United States is going to get to a point that that the Fed will not be able to continue to buy that government debt into the quantities that they are. They will have to move over to foreign government debt, which offers them a huge scope for the Fed's operation, as the quantity of foreign assets eligible for purchase by the Fed is several times the stock of the U.S. government debt. This is something they already have the authority to do. How many times have you heard anybody talk about that? Ever? None? Nobody? What's the Fed going to do? I'm telling you, man. They're going to go into a digital currency so that they can track, trace, and keep a hold of everything that is being moved around the world. You can spend in this nation, not in that nation. You can buy these products, not that products, right? This is a central banker's dream. But ultimately, right, is to get people out of cash to take it into negative territory. Good morning, Simon, and chat. Good morning, Wayne. We're going to give it like another 5 minutes, buddy. I'm sorry. I got to go to work here in a little bit, so. All right. I'm trying to keep my computer awake here. All right. You already know Russian. That guy is just a drunk joker. He's not mad. Are dumping to get USD to service existing loans. Yeah, you're going to see, like, this is the thing that I think a lot of people are going to miss, is that the dollar is going to strengthen in a way that is unlike anybody had ever seen. It's going to crash everything. It's going to absolutely devastate and crash everything. Stock market will crash, housing market will crash, everything's going to crash. And it's not because of what people think it is. It's because of the demand for the dollar is going to explode to try and pay off the debt. There's way too much debt, and it will come due. And when that debt comes due, when Brazil's debt comes due, when China's debt comes due, when all these corporations around the world and people who have written debts in dollars start to demand their dollars for the debt that they have issued essentially out there, when that demand for those dollars come due and there's not enough dollars to pay off that debt, those debts are going to start to default, and they are going to be scrounging, finding, hoping that they're going to get any dollars they can to pay off those contracts. Because as those contracts disappear, less transactions will be done with those contracts, meaning there's going to be even more demand for dollars to do the transactions. You see what's happening here? See, because the United States is no longer in control with the quantity of, like, not the Fed, not anybody is in control of the quantity of contracts that are being issued in dollars. That's the problem. Like, they have no control over that. You, as some individual in some foreign nation, decide to write a contract that is due in dollars, that has nothing to do with the United States, but it does come with a cost. The demand for dollars will increase when that debt comes due. And now the Fed is going to be in a position in which to provide the world with enough dollars in order to cover all this dollar-denominated debt. It's a liquidity crisis. That's what's going to eventually happen. And that's why Ben Bernanke said it. Well, the government's on an unsustainable debt path. We know this 20 plus years ago, right? Or else he wouldn't have been able to put it in this speech. But they know they have a huge scope of operations within the foreign assets. You think mortgages are going to be paid in U.S. dollars, or what's held in dollars going to be rolled into crypto or some other currency? No, it's always going to be in dollars. What's going to end up happening is all the dollars are eventually going to end up in a stable coin. All right? Because the Federal Reserve, in the way that the charter is written, is that they can't really issue out a currency directly out of the Federal Reserve. That it's like, it just doesn't work like that. Like, they can't just print money. And I know people say, well, yeah, that's what they do. No, right? They buy something. And when they buy something, they're buying something that has already been purchased. Right? This is important to understand because if they went directly, if the Federal Reserve went directly to the Treasury and bought treasuries directly from the government, then that would be monetizing the debt, and that's illegal. They can't do it that way. Right? So instead, what they do is they buy it from the primary dealers. The primary dealers, they're the ones who go to auction. They buy the treasuries, and the Federal Reserve comes in and buys it from the primary dealers. Primary dealer like J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, all these big giant banks, right? So then they're buying something that has already been purchased. And this is the way that the Fed operates in order to not be monetizing the debt, although that's exactly what they're doing, right? So when it comes to injecting money into the system, it doesn't necessarily come from the Federal Reserve injecting money directly into these banks. It's from the Federal Reserve buying an asset off the banks itself, right? Okay, so when this starts to take place, this is how the Federal Reserve operates their monetary policy by increasing and decreasing the reserves on these big banks. This has the amount of interest rates for overnight lending. Understanding it from the old school method when they had a limited reserve system is much easier than the abundant reserve system, which is now controlling the interest rates through the repo facility and interest on excess reserves, which is just kind of more complication in this overnight lending rate operation. But this is essentially how the Federal Reserve is doing it, right? And now, as they put this money into the banks, right, it fills up their reserves, fills up their balance sheet, they can lend that money into the system, right? And this is how the money gets out there. Now, the direct injection of money through like stimulus checks or something like that, again, this is the government that has borrowed money. All right. Now, with this borrowed money, it is due back. But yes, that money is directly injected, but it's from the government itself. Like the Fed can't do that. So now, if the Fed was to operate inside of like a stable coin kind of area, now they can operate the way they always have. Stablecoin operations can be regulated by the government. Stablecoins are backed by the dollar. So the Federal Reserve can continue to operate in the way that they always have with really no changes to what they're doing. Right? They can issue out the dollars just like they always have. The stablecoins can get those dollars, the cash, put it on their balance sheet, issue out the stablecoin, which is now essentially the digital currency that is out there. And the Federal Reserve can operate their monetary policy because anything being backed by the dollar has that monetary policy transferred right into it. So now here you got stablecoins being issued by companies out there being regulated by the government, whatever entities out there who are creating the stable coins, but they are essentially being regulated by the government while the Federal Reserve operates their monetary policy in the fashion that they always had. And that's how I see it going down. That they can put pretty much anything on their balance sheet at that point, right? Any asset that they want, because it's going to issue out a dollar that goes into the stable coin. Now it's tracked, traced, kept hold of, whatever, prevented from use, whatever draconian manners that they can imagine, I'm sure they'll do. But that's how I see it kind of happening, And the whole idea is to try and, again, to create aggregate demand within the economy through the lowering of interest rates. But if you hit the lower bound of zero, you essentially run out of monetary policy. But if you can go below zero, in the negative territory and not have to worry about people pulling all their money out in cash because there's no ability to pull their money out in cash. Now you'll force the people into investments, force them into treasuries, force them into something that is going to be very close to the cash, but something that doesn't have a negative interest rate to it, because that's the last thing you want to be in, is a negative interest rate environment with your cash. Right? So you'll be moving it into whatever. You'll be buying stuff, you'll invest in stuff, you'll do anything else but hold it in cash, because you won't have the cash to hold it in anyway. Or holding it in a deposit that has a negative rate. Guys, I gotta go. I'm gonna go get ready for work, but this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining in on this morning's live stream. 230 people watching with 136 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. Think about this for a little bit when it comes to the new construction market. We have major layoffs happening, big spike in layoffs within the construction market, within the construction labor, which is the first time in history that I can find. I left a chart down in the description so you can look for yourself, that we've had such a spike in the middle of summer, in the middle of July. always it's in the wintertime, and that would be pretty reasonable considering the season. But to find one happening in July is quite unusual considering the 25-year history of this chart showing every single spike happening in winter. It to me shows a sign of the times that the home builders are not active, not planning on being active, and what they are sitting on is a lot of inventory. And if you have a better environment to buy houses going into the future, those builders should do quite well considering that they are sitting on that massive amount of inventory. Give it some time and you will eventually see them start moving into new projects. And when the new projects start up, I don't feel that there's a lot of lumber within the system considering all the mill curtailment that has been taking place. And without a lot of lumber in the system, any kind of major spike from the home builders inside of new starts will probably send lumber prices skyrocketing again. Anyway, that's the sum up. Uneducated economist. You guys let me know.